The C-SPAN networks bring you long-form public affairs programming from the nation's capital and are a public service of your television provider. C-SPAN, created by cable.
You know, when you talk about educating the public, the question always comes up. People suggest that maybe the court should televise oral arguments, that people could see firsthand what goes on. And I know the court has historically rejected that. I think it was Justice Sotomayor, before she went on the bench, thought it would be a good idea to televise oral arguments, and then once she was on the bench, she changed her mind and thinks it's not a good idea. So I just wondered, you sense any change? You think there'll be a day when oral arguments will be on television? Do you think that's good or that's not good in the context of education, the folks? Could you all comment on that?
The question, do I think there'll be the day? It sounds as if we're more or less behind the times.
No, it's just a matter of, you know, history. I mean, today you'd probably reject that.
If you had English-style debate and you were handed the topic and you had to be either pro or con, you could make a lot of good arguments for television in the courtroom. Number one, it teaches. We teach. We teach what the Constitution is. We teach what rights are. We teach what responsibilities are. We're teachers. So why don't we go on the television? And it would be very good for lawyers who are preparing to, who haven't been before us before, who want to see what the dynamic of an argument is. And it's open. The public could see that we spend a lot of time on patent cases and railroad reorganization cases and so forth, and so that we have a technical commitment. And they could see, we hope, an argument that's rational and respectful. When we're in disagreement, our institutional tradition is not to make our colleagues look bad, it's to make the institution look good. And part of that is the way we conduct oral arguments. We are concerned that the presence of a TV camera, the knowledge that we're going to be on TV, would affect the way that we behave. And it's an insidious dynamic for me to think that one of my colleagues has asked a question just so that he or she could look good on TV. I don't want that dynamic. We would prefer the dynamic where we have a discussion in which we are listening to each other, in which we were listening to counsel, and we think the television would detract from that. So you can make good arguments either way. But I think I can speak for most of my colleagues, do not think television should be in the courtroom. We have audio available, and the transcripts are available. The press does a very good job of covering us. The press has the advantage, they know 3, 4, 6 months in advance what the issue are. They can prepare the background. They can have pictures of the litigants and so forth, and then they're all ready to write the story depending on what we write. So we have good press coverage as well. But I think the cameras in the courtroom are not a good idea.
Justice Brown, you got
No, he states the problem. But by the way, the oral argument's like 2%. I mean, most of what we take in and most of the decision making is on the basis of written briefs. Now, the first thing that if the public saw that on television, they'd think that was the whole story. It's not. It's a tiny part. Second thing they'd think, and because it's true of human nature, and it's a good thing about human nature, we relate to people we see. We relate to them more than a word on paper or a statistic. That's nice. It's good. But in the two people who are having their case in the court, there isn't like one is a bad one, one's a good one. And we're not deciding really on the basis for them. We are deciding a rule of law that applies to 300 million people who aren't in the courtroom. That's invisible on television. But then when you come down to it, I am fairly, I guess, impervious to making myself look ridiculous to get an answer to a question that I can best focus by giving some ridiculous example, and he knows that I do. You see, and all right, then they do, and the reporters are used to it, and they say, oh, God. But nonetheless, I'll do it. Now, my friends in the press, some of them tell me, you see if you do that the first time, that somebody takes that ridiculous thing out of context and puts it on the evening news, particularly someone who is not one of our regulars and doesn't really understand what's going on. Now, all of that kind of thing is the kind of thing, despite the good arguments the other way, that make us cautious and that make us conservative with a small c. We're trustees for an institution that had a long existence before us, and we sincerely hope will have a long existence after. And the worst thing that any of us feels he or she could do is to hurt that institution. And that makes us awfully cautious. Now, all that is the psychology at play. Now, you say, will it eventually happen? Yeah, sure. Because a generation will grow up that just unlike me and unlike him doesn't even know what it was like before things like that took place. But I think that's the best explanation that is in my mind. It's we both.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm not one who's called for having TVs in the courtroom, but I know somebody wanted to ask that question, so I thought I'd just ask it.